So brace yourselves a little bit before I tell you this because it's going to sound a little crazy. But Spider-Man, currently the avatar of an African spider deity, has accidentally started and found himself in the middle of a full-on god war. Yeah, like I said, pretty crazy, especially for a street level hero like Spider-Man. The Spider-Man specifically in question being Miles Morales. Now, that's not to say that Peter isn't dealing with his own stuff, as he was currently just the avatar of Sidorak, another deity in his own right, becoming a spider juggernaut. But in this case, we pick up with Miles and get a little bit of an explanation about what has been going on within his crazy life. With him going on to explain his problems within his therapy session he's having now, from him being turned into a vampire during the Blood Hunt storyline, traveling to Wakanda to find the cure, and then accidentally becoming the avatar of African deity, to even problems with his clone here in New York, Shift. Miles has been dealing with a lot recently, and since you know the title of this video, you know it's only going to get much crazier. But for all of his troubles and worries, the therapist has a pretty simple answer, but one that is pretty useful. As she goes on to say, Spider-Man, you are dealing with some incredible burdens, and it's okay to ask for help. I'd like for you to realize that messing up is okay, and learning lessons is what makes life, well, life. And with that, that concludes their session with Miles swinging off to go back to school. Yes, Miles is a superhero who is also a vampire with amazing powers, the avatar of a literal deity, yet he still has to go to school every day like every other average teen in New York. But something that isn't average and you don't see every day, we move over to the Raft, a super prison for super criminals, where we see the main antagonist of the story so far, a literal Greek demigod, one named Zip Zephyr. Now Zip Zephyr, he isn't like crazy powerful or anything, but still being a demigod, he is pretty powerful in his own right, which just makes it even funnier seeing him here on the Raft. So in one cell, you'd have like the Chameleon, a street level Spider-Man villain who can change his form in disguise, and in the other you have a literal Greek demigod. It's just pretty funny thinking about it. Yet here he is either way, in which he actually does have some history with the Spider-Man, with them crossing paths before, and after a series of events, Spider-Man eventually was able to defeat him and get him locked up where he is now. So of course he has a very specific disdain and hatred for Spider-Man, with us even going on to find out that he is essentially a laughingstock and a little bit of a loser among the other Greek demigods, with him even going on to monologue while in prison, the divinity of my birth and lineage was never given the respect by the other Olympians. I doubt Skyfather Zeus and the rest of his Olympians even know my name. I would change that, if only given the chance to show this world my greatness, in that I am deserving of my birthright. And almost like a genie listening in to his wishes and prayers, suddenly there's the intervention of another figure, an older gentleman in a suit, one that only Zip here can see. The old man in question also being able to hear his thoughts, and he knows exactly what is troubling the demigod. Zip even going on to say, you are not as you appear. No, you're not an old man, nor are you a mortal at all. You smell of Olympus. And here things are finally made clear for us, as this older figure was nothing but a disguise for Ares, the god of war himself. As he goes on to tell the prisoned demigod here, you have long been a laughingstock, and I think it's finally time you prove yourself. Continuing on saying, I'll offer you a gift as a token of my respect. In exchange, you become one of my war dogs. With us finally understanding what does Ares, the Greek god of war, have to do with anything Spider-Man related, as he goes on to say, become my war dog to do what seemingly no one in this wretched place can do. Kill Spider-Man. Zip here, of course, saying, what issue do you of all people have with Spider-Man? But Ares goes on to confirm none with Spider-Man or Miles specifically, but his connection to the other deity, the African spider god Anansi. Because Ares and Anansi, this other deity, they have a long history and basically don't like each other and want to harm each other. But of course, when you have two gods of different pantheons going head to head, there's a lot of collateral and damage and a misfire that can happen. So of course there are old laws and covenants that prevent two gods of different pantheons from full-on battling. As Zip Zephyr even goes on to say, Spider-Man, he's the avatar of the great spider, but the old laws prohibit us from fighting with the gods of the first continent, the voodoo. Which is true, there are certain laws and punishments in place for those who would break this covenant. But Ares just simply goes on to say, us? You're not a part of the godhood, the Olympians and people of the higher status. You're a lowly demigod child. Do you really think such pacts apply to you? Which just goes to show you that him, Zip Zephyr, being a lowly wind demigod deity, whatever, yeah, they're very low on the totem pole in Olympus. But there is an upside, as Ares goes on to say, if you complete this labor, if you kill Spider-Man, then I shall grant you full divinity. and all of the rights and privileges that comes with, being a full-on god, with Ares even bringing him his preferred weapon and gear. Just like in the same fashion that Captain America has his shield, Zip here has a bag named the Sakos, this bag being the only real powers that he has, which of course gives him his great control and power over the wind itself. Without it, he is just more or less a big, strong, tough guy. But this little power boost was the only thing he needed to completely break out of the raft and continue on Ares' mission. As he goes on to say, I will slay Spider-Man, avatar of Anansi, and gain my rightful seat among the Olympians. And speaking of which, this is the perfect time to go over Anansi, this great spider deity that we keep hearing about. So Anansi, who is widely known and technically is the first Spider-Man within the main Marvel history. Of course, being thousands of years old and being among the African pantheon, Anansi is not only very ancient but very powerful. So when Black Panther brought Miles into Wakanda searching a cure for him being a vampire, Anansi decided to use this opportunity to essentially claim Miles as his own herald, his avatar, curing him of not only his vampirism, but also bonding with Miles, literally being a voice and figure within his own head. And of course, with Anansi being known as the trickster deity, much like Loki is within the Norse pantheon, he is always up for messing with people, shaking things around, and trying to put on a quote-unquote great story with all of the conflicts and within his actions. Of course, Miles not having too much of a choice or say within the whole matter, he is where he is by necessity and not necessarily by want. And to be honest, I'm not too sure how I even feel about all of this deity avatar stuff. And this isn't just the issue here, even going on with the web of life and destiny and the spider totem stuff. I don't know if I'm too much of a fan of all the mystical side of Spider-Man, because of course traditionally Spider-Man is, a hero based on science, being bit by a radioactive spider and not part of a larger totem system at work and all of the other stuff that comes with it. Now, in some cases it could be interesting, like here Miles having to deal with being an avatar of a spider deity. It's interesting, sure, and I know it's not going to last, though I'm just not too sure about how I feel about everything. Let me know how you guys feel about this down below. I'm curious to see how the general consensus about all this is. With that though, we move back over to Miles in the middle of his Brooklyn Vision Academy school, and with him going through the daily motions of school, suddenly the voice in his head rings out and is Anansi himself, in a projection that only Miles can see within his own head. And even though Miles in this deity here has certain boundaries and rules, one in particular being no avatar stuff while he's at school or in therapy, we see that Anansi is breaking this boundary because it's important. As he goes on to say, I come with a warning of an approaching conflict, a story most foul indeed. My webs tell me someone soon shall make their true intentions known here. Of course, with this grave warning, Miles is like, wait, we're at a school, there are innocents that could get hurt. Why don't you, being this powerful deity and person you are, just go handle it? But as we find out, of course, as Ares mentioned before, there are certain laws that prohibit the gods and pantheons from directly interfering, with even Anansi going on to say, powerful as I may be, I cannot yet intervene. Because at the same time this is happening, we see outside in New York, Zip Zephyr is finally making his way towards Miles after locating him using his magical and Greek powers or whatever. He starts closing in fast with the literal command of the wind itself behind him. And just then, Miles' spider sense goes off, hitting him so hard he almost faints. Of course, only warning him, everybody else doesn't have that same luxury of getting to know when danger is about to strike, as soon as the walls and doors burst open from the powerful gust of wind, we see this conflict immediately begin. Spider-Man going on to fight and protect the fellow innocents against a literal Greek demigod, with him even going on to say, my ears are ringing, my head is on fire, muscles screaming, but I can't stay down. Getting back up, getting back into the fight is just part of the job. And with that, he immediately transforms into his new suit he got from Black Panther and the time he spent in Wakanda. He jumps into battle to finally get his rematch against the demigod of wind. A rematch because in their first encounter, Miles actually beat him. Now, of course, he didn't low diff him, like it wasn't super easy, but he got it done. Here, though, things seem to be very different, as because without Miles' vampire strength boost from before, and now this wind demigod being boosted by Ares, yeah, the odds are not in his favor. As immediately bull rushing forward, he grabs Miles and slams him into the concrete. Even with his new high-tech vibranium suit, Spider-Man goes on to say he can feel his bones starting to bruise. And because Zip here has very specific instructions, he is here to kill Spider-Man once and for all. He starts using his wind abilities to literally suck the wind and breath out of Spider-Man's lungs. Pulling a Zahir from Avatar. And this would have been successful. How do you counter being held by the neck and the literal air from your lungs being sucked out? Spider-Man even going on to say he is 3 seconds from passing out. That is until he hears it. Here's another person entering the fold, hearing the sound of thunder, with the arrival of two full-on gods, Thor the god of thunder and Hercules the one of strength. And why is the king of Asgard, Thor, and Hercules, the god of strength, here just randomly in New York to save Spider-Man? Well, this is the doing of Anansi. As in a previous issue beforehand, Anansi goes on to explain to Thor that Ares is scheming behind the scenes, using different heralds and people under him, granting them power to mess with Spider-Man, his herald. Because as I've said before, Anansi and Ares have a little bit of conflict in history. Yet because of the laws and consequences in place, the two gods couldn't just go head to head and fight, so they had to use their avatars or lesser beings and mortals to fight for them. I essentially say all that to say that Thor and Hercules arrive thinking there is going to be this giant battle with Ares himself, yet they arrive and just find this lackey in his place. Even with him being a demigod of his own, he is nothing compared to the power of Thor and Hercules. As the wind demigod goes on to attack the duo, it goes about as well as you would expect. Zip, being overconfident within his new abilities, gets him humbled really quickly as he is almost instantly defeated. Thor going on to say, what is a breeze compared to the person who can control the storm? As he is quite easily defeated by the two real deities and put in his place, even getting Mjolnir dropped on his back so he couldn't escape. And with that main threat defeated, all the heroes here go on to talk and everything becomes a little bit more clearer, with it being revealed that Anansi essentially tricked Thor and Hercules to come in here, claiming that Ares, the god of war, was about to launch a giant attack and break the covenant that seemingly all of the pantheons and different godheads agreed to, which technically wasn't a lie, more so just clever misunderstanding. As just then, Spider-Man Spider-Sense starts to go off once more, and Ares himself arrives on the scene, here to collect Zip, who failed in his mission to slay Spider-Man, and of course to confront the other deities here. And with Ares, Anansi, Thor, and even Hercules here, different beings from different pantheons, Ares goes on to do something a little unorthodox in his methods. He goes on to challenge the spider deity to something called Agon. And without a second thought, Anansi instantly accepts. Spider-Man completely still being confused about what even is happening, who is doing what, and what did Anansi essentially drag Spider-Man into. As Anansi continues to go on to say, Agon is a tradition long favored by my siblings. Stories told throughout the pantheons far and wide. Yes, it's a song sung only by the most divine, because imagine what sweet harmonies we are going to find in a tournament of the gods. So yes, Spider-Man has been dragged into and inadvertently started the War of the Gods. Of course, through Anansi's little trickery and misdoings, it is almost lopsided in the power. Because while Spider-Man is strong, he's no Thor, Hercules, or Ares, yet here he is going to have to fight against these beings of great power, deities in their own right, and then you just have Miles in the middle of it, doing his best to even survive this little tournament here. But that is something we're not going to see as this issue and video comes to a close. If you have enjoyed, leave a like, or subscribe if you're new and want to see more content just like this. Leave all your thoughts and comments down below, as this was AJ here at The Hero Informer, and thank you for watching.